On this episode of Peel Out Garage, we're painting the Hyosung. Welcome back, guys. This is the third episode in our $450 Hyosung build. Now, quick note before we actually get into the video, it has been 2 years since that episode was filmed. We are talking current time at the moment. The bike is a lot more assembled than what the episode will show. That is because I moved house, we had COVID, we had lots of stuff going on. But I will catch you up to where the bike is at the moment at the end of the video, and there will be updates coming soon. Now, let's get into the video that we filmed 2 years ago. Hope you enjoy it. So when you're picking out a paint color, it's a good idea to go out into the sun and check the color that you like. You will find that the colors generally change when they're in direct sunlight versus inside a shop looking under artificial light. Things like if you're going for a pearl or a fleck in your paint, you'll get a much different reaction to it looking at it in direct sunlight. The other thing as well is, like, I like this yellow in the sun now, but inside it's got more of a brown tinge to it. So it's good to go and check these things. You can also change the way your color looks in different light by picking a different primer. So a lighter primer will give you a different light in the sun versus in the dark. Darker primers generally look darker at night time. So if we put a darker primer under this, we get more of a brown color out of the sunlight. The color that I want is it? My motorcycle.
While we're here, might as well get some paint mixed up for other projects.
So, I need some black to do my frame in. Yes. But I want it to last. I was going to powder coat it, but for the amount of work involved and the time restraints, I think painting it would be a better option. What would you recommend?
I think unless you're doing a bare chassis and knowing your vehicle, I think you're better off not trying to go down that road at the moment. If you're only doing those smaller sections, go with an X primer, rub that down, and then just do an epoxy paint over the top. Okay. So epoxy in the spray can is good for most applications. It's fairly hard wearing.
Okay, let's let it go. You need a primer for this?
Yes, you do.
What's the primer for it?
I'd use a black etch primer. My GPI black etch primer is probably one of the better ones.
Okay. Awesome. So rub it down, prep it with what?
Prep salt.
Waxing grease?
Yep. Prep salt, waxing grease remover.
And then prime it and then paint it. Clear coat it or no clear coat?
No, you won't need a clear coat over the epoxy. Okay. It's between a satin finish and a gloss finish. It's sort of not a high gloss finish, but it's not a satin finish. It's got a little bit of gloss to it. So it's a really good finish.
Awesome. Automotive paint stripper. Is there any difference between different paint strippers?
Yes, there is. That's the equivalent of the old Canvas brand, which is a really good mix of paint stripper. It's quite sticky, so it stays on what you painted on, whereas a lot of the other ones are quite thin, more like the spray out strippers, and the spray out strippers you'll spray it on and they sort of stick, but then they start to droop fairly quickly. So the Canvas brand actually has a lot of hold to it.
Okay.
And the new formula is identical to the old Canvas brand.
Alright, so we've got the bits and pieces we need to paint the bike. So we're going to start with paint stripper for the frame. And then once that's stripped back, we're going to clean it up with wire brush and a scour pad to make sure that we get any rust and clean up the metal properly. Then we're going to clean it with wax and grease remover before we paint it. Then we'll do our black etch primer. Then we'll do an epoxy paint over that, which doesn't need a clear coat. We've got some tape to mask up any bits that we don't want painted. Then we're going to use sandpaper and sanding pads on the tank and the fairings. We'll go over that to the spot putty for any little scratches and dints that we find. Then we've got our primer. We've got our custom yellow ×2. And then we've got a special gold clear coat. So there's gold fleck in the clear coat on this one, which will add depth to the paint. And then we finish that off with a standard clear. So this is also a bit of blasphemy. We've got a Hemi in a 1932 Ford. So when people say that you shouldn't LS swap a Dodge because it's the wrong thing to do, hot rods.
Right, so we've just gotten back with our paint. We're going to start on the frame with some paint. Dude, what the hell are you doing?
Which is stripping.
Not that stripping. Come on, let's go do
Oh, the frame.
Yes, the frame. Oh my god.
Okay, so we've got our paint stripper. We've got brushes. You just get cheap ones because they're going to get destroyed anyway. And some PPE. I'm going to wear glasses and a mask and some gloves because this stuff will eat your skin. It's really, really, really toxic. So the frame has been wire brushed, then I went over it with red Scotch-Brite on my drill. I cleaned up all the big areas with that. And then I went through with 400 grit sandpaper on all the front-facing surfaces, so anything that's going to be visible when the bike's reassembled. On the inside of the frame, the paint that we're using will stick to pretty much anything. It'll stick to rust, it'll stick to more or less anything. So it doesn't look perfect, but it's going to be way better than some of the other places that we've seen this paint used before. So I've got our primer in some hot water at the moment. It's getting warmed up so it's all ready to go, and then we'll shake it for a while. I went over the frame with hot water out of the kettle, boiling hot water. There's two reasons for that. One is to warm the frame up. The second is because we don't have an air compressor, so we can't blow all the water out of the frame. So the theory is that going over it with hot water will sort of help dry it out and make sure that there's a minimal amount of water on it. Now next step before painting is our wax and grease remover. So I've got a big bottle of this. We're going to go over it with a microfiber, wax and grease, get the whole thing nice and clean, and then we'll start spraying the undercoat. Alright, so frame is primed. I actually really like it in satin black. But unfortunately I've already spent lots of money on gloss black paint, so it is going gloss black.
Does look amazing.
Really happy with how this is turning out. Alright, so what I'm doing is I've sprayed some epoxy into this spray can, which is the same paint that I used in the rest of the frame. I'm just going through and just gently touching up some of the areas that were a bit hard to get with the spray can. Obviously it's really hard to get into these tight little crevices, but I just want to make sure that I've got good paint coverage all over it, because the last thing I want is to put all this work into painting the frame and then find some rough spots in a year's time where I didn't get. You can actually do this as well on cars, but stone chips, but they recommend using a cotton bud for that. And you dip the cotton bud in the paint and then you actually drop it. What happens is instead of you getting like a brush mark in your paint, you get like a little an infill, sort of fills it in like a small amount of body fill. And you can actually do the same with this stuff. I don't know if the camera will pick it up, but you see you can sort of dab it and it doesn't give you brush marks, it gives you like a really nice smooth finish. Check that out. struggle to tell, mate.
That's it. That's good.
That's some pro level stuff right there. We're masking up the engine. I went down and bought a whole bunch of high temp paint in various different colours and coatings and stuff like that. Gonna mask it up. I've waxed and greased it. I've gone through and cleaned up all the corroded bits of aluminium, and then we should be sweet to start painting it. I'm just masking up these bolts that I polished earlier. What we're doing with this engine is called a rattle can rebuild. So for those of you who don't know, what you do is you clean your engine really well, and then you clean up a couple of the bolts like this to be nice and shiny and pretty, and then you go and you buy yourself some rattle cans and you paint it, and then you can tell people that it's a new engine because it looks nice. So if you're trying to mask up a bolt like this one, where you can't quite get around the back of it, what you do is you grab your tape, 2 fingers, and then you just gently come around, pull it nice and tight as you go, and you'll see you only mask up the bolt, and what happens is because it stretches it, it can't accidentally get on anything else. Now you just watch that as you come around the front, nice and smooth, make sure that this one matches up, and then you just fold this over like that. Done. So from what we can tell, there's a little mark on the water pump, and it looks like it's either lent against something, been dropped, someone's kicked it because they don't like Hyosung, I don't know, but it's dented the case and it's actually cracked it just in here. But the good news is I got online, and a GV650, which is the cruiser version with the same engine, comes with a polish case. So for $59 I've ordered one of them. And then 20 bucks for a gasket for this side, 20 for a gasket for that side. So what I'll do now is I'll still paint the engine as usual with my primer. I won't worry about painting this, but I'm going to paint this cover here and the side cover and the water pump in our metallic black. And then I'll do the case on the other side metallic black, and then it'll have a nice polished main case to go around it. I reckon it'll look really good actually when it's done. And then we're going to do a special coating, which was Harley's suggestion, on the cam covers. So that'll be pretty cool. Alright, you'll notice that my background has changed slightly. We had to move the paint booth to a different area of the backyard. I wanted to try and keep it away from my car and the bikes and all the tools and stuff. This was something we were using up to clean up, you know, bits and pieces and stuff. But with the wind, we almost lost it yesterday, so I thought it's probably safer we stick it out here. It's currently raining and windy and not good weather for painting. So what we're going to do is we're going to paint this. So because they're not ideal painting conditions, what we're going to do is I've got that wrinkle paint I was talking about earlier. I'm going to try that out on the tail light housing and the rear, what do you call it, the rear guard or rear inner guard?
Yeah, rear inner guard, I think.
So we'll clean that up and we'll throw the wrinkle paint on it. I've had a look at it. It says that it should be fairly resilient to painting in bad conditions, but I want to paint this first because I don't really care too much about this. Like if this stuff's up, I'll just throw it in the bin and buy another $10. But we don't want to go painting the engine or something that's, you know, a bit harder to work on, and then we find out that we, you know, didn't know something about it or we don't like how it looks, that sort of thing. So start with something that's, you know, easily replaced or that you're not using, and try your paint on that. So we've got our wrinkle paint. So we're going to try this out on these bits here. I've had this sitting in a bucket of hot water for what, about 10 minutes now. It's hot enough it's actually ruined the label on it. I've cleaned these with banana, what do we call it? Banana sauce?
Banana juice.
Banana juice. Then wax and grease removed it, and then we dried it with a heat gun. Heated up the paint. Obviously we've hung it up. We've hung it up from one of the spots where those little clips go on there, so you won't actually see where it's been hung up. So we're going to start this off with just a really quick coat of spray. Let that dry for a bit, and then we'll come back and do a really heavy coat over the top of that. So we're using a heat gun. The idea here is that you need to dry the paint fairly quickly with intense heat, and that's how you get that wrinkle finish. I was reading that people actually put these in the oven so that they get a really consistent finish on them, but I like my oven not smelling like paint, so you want to try and move this around, get it as evenly spread as possible so that you get a nice even texture on it. Don't sit in one place too long or you will burn the paint. You'll find that because this is metal, as it starts to heat up, it'll hold and retain the heat, so you don't need to cook the entire area too much. Once it gets up to the temperature, it should sort of bake the paint on its own. We've fully painted the engine. This is in a satin black. So you'll see it's got a bit of a sort of shine to it, but it's not over the top. Because it's a really cold day today, we've painted the engine and I'm just going over it with the heat gun. It's not going to cure it, but it will tack it off so that at least it's dry to the touch and sort of help it on its drying process so that the cold weather doesn't damage it. So we've gone through, we've unmasked everything, unmasked the cam covers, intake ports, all that sort of stuff. So we'll put the new cam covers on. We'll wait for the paint to dry a little bit more, and then we should be putting it back in the frame in probably an hour or so. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I reckon an hour.
Engine is ready to go, so we're going to get that in the frame. Then we'll get the swing arm on, then we'll put the plastics on, wiring limb on, headlight on, tail light on, and we'll start reassembling the bike. We should be able to get it mostly back together except for the wheels and the plastics and the tank by the end of today. We've got our Wrinkle finished valve covers on it. I just wanted to show you something with these. So this is cast aluminium, and you can see the sort of finish that we got on it. It looks absolutely insane. I'm so happy with how this has come out. But we also did the same finish on this piece of plastic, which is the inner guard. And you can see it looks completely different. It actually looks more like a tar sealant than the Wrinkle finish. It still looks good though. It's given us a nice clean finish, which is what we were going for. So what we did the first time I painted, I actually started on this, and I did it as usual with the tack coat, and I went over it with a couple more coats to build it up. We didn't get the finish I wanted, and I wasn't really sure why, so I looked into it, looked on a couple of forums, and they were saying that instead of going about it the normal way, putting a tack coat down, spraying the lathe and building it up, you actually want to do 3 heavy coats. So you go this way, and then this way, and you just do 3 like nice big heavy coats. The idea is to get it as even as possible. Then you go through with a heat gun, and you actually heat up the paint nice and gently and slowly, and that's what actually gives it that cracked sort of wrinkle finish. So make sure if you are going to go down that road of doing that finish, you need to get a heat gun, otherwise it just won't work. We've got too many bikes, man. This is just ridiculous. So the next bit of this build that's going to be a lot of fun is the assembly part. Because this is how Harley organised the bolts. Now, I seem to remember, if we cut to here...
These are for the manual. These are for my bonnet. Label your bolts, people, or else you're going to have a bad time.
That's right. Last time he said, organise your bolts so you'll have a bad time.
Well, also remember, organising that, then somebody come along and just flipped everything out.
Nah, that doesn't sound right.
Yeah. That's alright, I only spent an hour on that. Thanks, man.
All good, bro. So I've got a bunch of these stainless steel Allen key bolts. The bike's got like a whole mixture. So when it was pulled apart by the previous owner, I'm guessing that they just reassembled it with whatever they had. I don't think they've got quite this many different like assortments of bolts on a Korean bike. I mean, they could, but what we're going to do is we're going to go through and replace. I want to replace anything that's going to have a yellow fairing on it. I want to replace it with black bolts. Anything that's going to have black on it, I'd like to replace with gold bolts or silver. So over time, once I start, reassembling it and figure out what I actually need, I'm going to order new bolts for it and sort of replace them as we go. Anything that's visible, obviously, if it's not visible, there's no point spending heaps of time and money on special bolts for it. But that's all I've got Allen key bolt wise to reassemble the entire bike. But luckily for me, I did pull apart my mate's MT-07 and replace all the bolts on his bike with gold bolts. So I've got all these nice brand new bolts, all Allen key. I think I've got some more somewhere else in here as well. But I've also got, wait for it, how cool is this? Come with me. I've also got over here on the Hyosung shelf. Ooh.
That looks fancy.
Gold. Ooh. The only problem with these bolts is that they literally are the weight of a piece of paper. Like, the actual plastic. Here is some that we use to put the fairings on the MT-07. That's how damaged they are from holding a fairing on. They are absolute garbage. So, what we're going to do is rebuild the entire Hyosung. You said it was a secret.
Yeah.
That indicated that you knew what it was.
Yeah, of course. I was saying, what is that, people? Guess in the comments below.
Oh, good. So this thing's never going to start again is what you're saying.
Look.
Alright. This one.
I wanna drown inside this. I wanna drown inside this. Go down and like I captain. I ain't never had a vibe this vibrant. Then but also shiny with that 3-eye vision. Take this moment, I'ma die inside it. I am pariah, I am Mariah. Words they carry, don't trust the silence. Gotta fill it all up, like to my phone screen, ultraviolet. This ultraviolence, probably need more milk, but it all spilled. Sit with my guilt inside it. Temper, don't throw a tantrum. Throw words at random, make an anthem. Spin game like frisbee, make it happen. Act like I'm not trapped in the swelling wave. Tide ain't coming yet, but I want water to my now. Tide ain't coming yet.
Harley and I have got the wiring loom mostly on now. We've got the coils in, coil plugs on, relays in,
Ignition
module in. There was a bit of stuffing around with the wiring loom trying to figure out exactly where it went again because we pulled it apart in such a rush. We both forgot to take photos of where everything went, but we're pretty sure we've got it nailed now. So up in here we've got all the wiring for all the controls and the handlebars. These plugs down here go to the radiator. I'm waiting on the new one to arrive, so we can't do a lot more with that yet. Same thing with the handlebars and the controls, that's all coming later. Alright guys, that is the end of the episode. Thank you for watching and I hope you enjoyed it. Now, I will show you through where the bike is currently at and where we'll be taking off from in the next episode in part 4 of this build. So over the last 2 years I have been tinkering away with this bike, slowly assembling parts. I actually bought a whole nother bike that was running and riding that would have actually been a better spot to start. But you know, I'd already painted the frame and gotten as far as I'd gotten. So since that video was filmed, we've installed a aftermarket aluminium radiator because the one that I had was bent. New forks off the other bike, new front wheel. I've actually gone through 3 front wheels and 2 axles trying to find a straight second-hand combination, but I now have that. Rear wheel is on, had to buy a new swing arm, and then that swing arm was damaged, so then I actually used the swing arm off the new bike that I bought. Most of the electrical is on the bike. At the moment, I'm trying to set up a different set of gauges. So the GT model, which is what this was, has a digital cluster. The Comet has normal analog speedo and tacho. So that's what I'm trying to put on this, but kind of trying to make a combination of the two. So we'll stay tuned for that. The headlight, a mate of mine came over and actually broke the headlight that I bought for it, so I have to buy a new one of those. And then it's really, the biggest thing holding us up is going to be the fairings. Oh, one last thing that I actually did end up doing. I got the case for my motor. So painted everything, everything's nice and assembled. I just have to polish all the bolts before I do the final assembly on it. Now, as far as painting the fairings and tanks concerned, I've actually tried to do that 4 times and I've tried filming it 3 times. But over the last 12 months, the summers that we've had have been nothing but rain. And rain creates humidity when it's mixed with heat. And those 2 things don't mix very well with paint. So I have painted the tank twice and had it stuff up twice. I actually had to buy 2 new fairings because the fairings that I tried to paint kept stuffing up. I did manage to get a undercoat and base color on the guard, but no clear coat. So painting it is a whole nother process that I'll have to start again as far as, you know, all the plastics and everything goes. But we're waiting for someone to come around and we'll get onto that. So that hopefully gives you a bit of an update on where the bike is at the moment, and I hope you'll stay tuned for the next update. See you guys.